There's something about beach houses. By day, they feel like paradise. Warm sunlight spilling over the sand, salty wind tangling your hair, the ocean stretching out forever. You can hear the gulls overhead, smell the sunscreen on your skin, feel the porch boards warm under your bare feet. But when the sun sinks behind the horizon, everything changes. The friendly crash of waves slows into something heavier, like the ocean is breathing in the dark. The wind seems to carry whispers you can't quite place, and the shadows feel alive, stretching into every corner. It's in those hours, when the world outside is nothing but black water and cold air, that you realize how far you are from help, and how close you might be to something else entirely. These are 3 true stories from people who found out that a vacation by the sea isn't always peaceful. Sometimes the tide brings in more than seashells. I rented the place because it was cheap. That should have been my first warning. It was mid-September, off-season, so the air was cooler and the beach was almost empty. I'd been working 60-hour weeks and desperately needed to get away. The listing showed a small, 2-story beach house with faded blue paint, a wraparound porch, and a staircase leading straight from the deck to the sand. It looked perfect. The first night was peaceful. Just me, a couple of bottles of wine, and the ocean stretching endlessly in front of me. I fell asleep on the couch with the windows open, the sound of the waves rocking me into a deep sleep. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to a light shining through the window. At first, I thought it was the moon reflecting on the water, but it was too bright, too steady. I rubbed my eyes, got up, and stepped onto the porch. That's when I saw it. A lantern. Not electric, but an old-fashioned glass lantern, glowing softly and swaying in the breeze about 50 feet down the shore. It wasn't moving toward me, just hanging there in the darkness. I told myself it was a night fisherman or maybe a guest from another beach house. But when I looked up and down the beach, it was completely empty. I went back inside, locked the door, and eventually drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I walked along the beach, half expecting to find footprints or maybe a pile of fishing gear. There was nothing, not even a mark in the sand. The second night, the lantern came back. Same place, same glow. This time, I decided to watch. I sat on the porch in the dark, my eyes fixed on it. For a while, it just swayed gently. Then, slowly, it began moving toward me. My stomach tightened. When it was maybe 30 feet away, I could make out the figure holding it, tall, thin, with hunched shoulders. I stood up, my heart pounding, and called out. The figure stopped. The lantern lowered, and then the light went out, like it had been blown away by the wind. My eyes strained to see in the darkness, but the beach was empty again. I left the next morning, cutting my trip short. A few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I searched the property's history. The listing was gone, but I found an old newspaper clipping from the 1980s. It told the story of a man who walked the beach every night with a lantern, searching for his wife who drowned during a storm. They never found her body. One night, he disappeared too, presumed lost at sea. I don't think he's lost. I think he's still looking. This one didn't happen to me, it happened to my cousin Rachel. She and a group of her friends had planned a long weekend at a big old beach house in North Carolina. It was the kind of place that looked beautiful in pictures but felt heavier in person. Too many rooms, floors that complained under your feet, and that damp smell of salt and mildew that clung to the air no matter how wide you opened the windows. When they arrived, the owner greeted them out front, handed over the keys, and gave a quick tour. Everything seemed fine until they reached the upstairs hallway. There was one door at the very end that stood out immediately. It was locked, not just with a simple doorknob lock, but with an actual padlock, the kind you'd use on a storage unit. Rachel, being curious, asked what was inside. The owner's smile froze for just a moment before he said, "Maintenance storage, not for guests," and quickly moved on. That first night was fun. They grilled seafood on the deck, played cards until their eyes felt heavy, and drank far more than they should have. By midnight, everyone was asleep. Everyone except Rachel. She'd always been a light sleeper, and at around 3 a.m., she woke to a sound. Knocking. Soft, slow knocking. It was coming from upstairs. She figured maybe one of her friends had gotten lost or locked themselves somewhere. So she slipped out of bed and went to check. The sound grew louder with each step she took down the hall, until she realized it was coming from that locked door. 3 slow knocks. Silence. Then 3 slow knocks again. She whispered, "Hello?" But there was no reply. Leaning closer, she pressed her ear against the door. That's when she heard it breathing. Slow, steady breathing just on the other side. Rachel's chest tightened. She hurried to wake her friend Chris, who was staying in the room across the hall. When he stumbled out, bleary-eyed, the knocking had stopped. Chris laughed it off, saying it was probably the old house settling. Rachel didn't argue, but something in her gut told her it wasn't the house. The next night it happened again, but louder. The knocks came faster, sharper, followed by a sound that made Rachel's skin crawl, fingernails scraping against the wood from inside. She froze, her eyes locked on the padlocked door. Chris came out again, this time looking unsettled. "Okay. That's not the house," he admitted. They barely slept after that. By the 3rd morning, Rachel had had enough. She asked the owner about the room again, pushing harder this time. His expression tightened, and his voice was quieter when he said, "Look, some things in old houses just stay closed. It's better that way." They left a day earlier than planned. Months later, Rachel came across a haunted rentals thread online. The house was there, clear as day in one of the photos. Someone in the comments told the story of a teenage girl who lived there in the 1960s. She'd been caught sneaking out one night and, as punishment, her parents locked her in her room. That night, a hurricane hit. The house flooded. She never made it out. Now, people say if you stay there during high tide, you'll hear knocking from that upstairs room. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's frantic, but it always comes from the other side of the locked door. I was 19, working a summer job at a little seafood shack by the beach. A friend of mine offered me a week at her family's beach house for free, and I jumped at it. In my head, I pictured lazy mornings on the porch, afternoons swimming in the surf, and quiet walks along the sand at night with nothing but the sound of waves for company. The house was perfect, bright, airy, and so close to the water that the waves almost touched the bottom of the deck stairs. The only thing that felt a little off was the old wooden pier just a short walk away. It stretched far out into the water, its beams dark with age, covered in barnacles, and slick from years of salt spray. The locals told me it was dangerous to go under it. The currents there were unpredictable and could pull you out in seconds. Still, at low tide, you could walk underneath if you were careful. One evening, just before the sun dipped below the horizon, I decided to take a stroll. The tide was going out, leaving wide stretches of wet sand that glistened in the fading light. The shadows of the pier's wooden supports stretched long and thin across the beach, like fingers reaching toward the shore. That's when I saw him, a man, standing ankle-deep in the water beneath the pier. He was facing the shore, completely still, like he'd been waiting for something or someone. At first, I thought maybe he was fishing, but I didn't see any rod, no tackle box, no bucket, nothing. He wore dark pants and a white button-up shirt that clung to his body, soaked through. His hair hung flat against his head, dripping water down his face. I hesitated, then called out, "Hey, you okay?" He didn't move. I took a step closer, my feet sinking slightly into the wet sand. That's when he turned his head toward me. His skin was pale, unnaturally pale, like it hadn't seen the sun in years. His eyes, I can't even put them into words. They looked swollen, heavy, like he'd been underwater far too long. And then he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. His lips were cracked, stretched too wide over his teeth. There was something wrong about it, like the expression didn't belong on his face at all. Without a word, he stepped backward into the deeper shadows of the pier. 1 step, 2 steps, then he was gone. I froze for a second, my heart pounding, and then I turned and ran. By the time I reached the beach house, I slammed the door behind me and leaned against it, my chest heaving. I didn't tell anyone that night. I wasn't even sure I believed what I'd seen. The next morning, I went to a small diner for coffee, still thinking about it. When the waitress came by, I mentioned it casually, asked if anyone went fishing under the pier at sunset. She stopped mid-step, her face going pale. You shouldn't go near that pier after dark," she said quietly. "People see him." She told me about a fisherman who drowned there 20 years ago, swept under by the current, gone before anyone could save him. They never found his body. And ever since, visitors sometimes reported seeing a soaked man under the pier at low tide. Always silent, always watching, always smiling. I never walked near that pier again. Maybe it's the isolation. Maybe it's the endless stretch of dark water that swallows the horizon. Or maybe some places along the coast just can't let go of the dead. They keep them close, tucked into the tide and the shadows, waiting for someone new to wander by. So the next time you find yourself in that cozy little beach house, listening to the ocean at night, remember. Those late knocks, strange lights, and figures you think you see out of the corner of your eye might not be tricks of your imagination. And if you notice a lantern glowing faintly on the sand, or hear knocking from behind a door that should be empty, or catch sight of a soaked, smiling man beneath a pier, turn around, and don't look back.